Yeah, I don't even know what this video is anymore, but we're gonna get this guy, back. Hello friends, welcome to my channel for another action figure video. So today's gonna be kind of a review and kind of a customization. I just got in this Mezco 112, the Batman figure, after pre-ordering it two plus years ago. It's finally here. Very excited about it. It definitely has some issues, and we're gonna get into what I think those are and what I want to fix about it. I'm not going to do a full review because there are already a few great ones that are up on YouTube. There's Bat Bomb. You got D Amazing, of course. Being that you've probably already seen those, I want to just kind of talk about my thoughts on it and what I want to do to improve it, and hopefully what you will also be able to do based on the guidance from this video. My goal is to try to make it like, here's how you could do it if you don't have a lot of experience or like the specific skill set to do this. I want to show this comparison of the two because this one kind of illustrates some of the stuff that I want to fix about this one. So this is my custom of the McFarlane version. This was one of the first videos I did on my channel, actually, probably 2 years ago or so. You can see the difference between the two. Obviously, this one's taller. This is a 7-inch scale figure. That's a 6-inch scale. And I think that this one has a much more accurate look to Robert Pattinson's Batman because of the height of the head and the neck mainly. So that's something I really want to fix on this figure. This one does look a little short, and I've seen at least one person has like extended the legs. The neck sits way too low on the body. So that's the main thing I want to fix. And I feel like if you fix any one thing about this figure, if it's that, you're already on your way to a much more accurate looking display. Also, if you notice how I weathered this one, it looks very like lived in. This one doesn't have that, right? It looks very pristine. They really didn't do any weathering aside from maybe a little bit of like silver dry brushing on the bat symbol. We're gonna weather him up a little bit and make him look like he's actually kind of been around town, fighting people, doing stuff. So next, I'd like to take a closer look at the Mezco figure itself. Looking at the figure in some closer detail, and the first thing I want to say about it, I think this is one of the best head sculpts that Mezco has ever done. I have the Muff Toys head sculpt, which is a beautiful work of art, and I think while it is better finished than this one, I think this is more accurate to Pattinson and the cowl. I would like to touch this one up paint-wise a little bit. I think that the eyes are actually some of the best that Mezco's done as well. Typically with blue eyes, they make them too blue. Usually they just go too bright and it just looks kind of cartoony, but this is as perfect as a Mezco eye paint gets, I think. The only thing I want to do to it is maybe like stain the whites a little bit so they're not so white and they look a little bit more lifelike, and then put a gloss coat on it just to make them more reflective. Look at all the pitting and the scratches and texture on the cowl. Like, that's phenomenal. And I like the choice of materials that they use here. This is very similar to the Mezco Daredevil figure from the Netflix series. But yeah, I think this looks really great. I love the mixed material usage here. Fabric suit looks really, really good. My only gripe is that I think these should have been the same fabric as the rest of the suit. I understand that, there's a lot to consider material-wise when doing that, but I think it would have been more accurate. I don't know how they would have done that, so I'm not here to point fingers and say they did it wrong, but I think that would have helped. I think that this is a really nice solution, this kind of like laced up. The McFarlane figure didn't even attempt to have this kind of detail on it. And I don't know how much of that is like they got this out quickly and so they didn't have time to like see this in its full detail. But to that point though, I don't think that these shoulder guards are accurate. I think that these are actually supposed to be black and maybe these inset pieces are gray. I'm going to be looking mostly at the InArt version of this. For those who don't know, InArt, they are like Hot Toys on steroids basically. They're like incredibly accurate, very expensive, but just beautiful, very detailed figures. Another thing I like about this is the cape. I think the cape is, yes, it's thin, and that's something people have complained about, but the challenge when you make a cape or any fabric in this scale is that it doesn't obey the laws of gravity the same way that it would its full-size counterpart. So you have to make certain considerations, and the thinner the cape material, the less it's going to bulk up here. Given that they really bungled the neck situation on this one, you need the lowest profile cape possible. One of the things you see a lot is people don't really know how to do cape management. So when we first saw images of this figure, everybody had it like this, and the cape was just looking ridiculous. Tucking it under the shoulder guards is a good way to go. But in the end of the day, I think it looks pretty good. we have our work cut out for us, but I don't think it's going to be a ton of work. Oh, that sounds like a guy who just jinxed himself. See that guy right there? That's me. And I did jinx myself. It all started back when I bought this figure. So we're going to get it to the workbench, try to make this thing look better. All right, so first things first, I want to paint the face. To do that, we're just gonna use a couple simple supplies. This is all pretty inexpensive stuff. Something I should mention too is I use these like reader magnifiers for this kind of work. I have good vision, but you're doing something this small, it helps to make it larger for yourself to see. So got some Deco Art blue paint, Prussian blue, deep burgundy, kind of a brick red color. You can use any red pretty much as long as it's not too bright. And then just kind of a basic flesh color. On top of that, I've just got this like takeout lid. I wanted to show something really simple and clear, and we'll get to why in a minute. Some water, and then I like to use this Vallejo gloss varnish. This is what you use to make eyes look shiny. I'll put links to this stuff in the description below. I know these you can get at any craft store, like I got these at Michael's Crafts. This came in a pack that I got on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for that as well. But really any kind of flesh colored paint will work. I'm gonna do my best to capture as much of this on camera as possible. It gets hard when you're doing intricate detailed work, but this is the stock sculpt. I haven't done anything to it yet. What we want to do is just bring some life out of it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of this blue. I'm talking like a dab, just a dab will do you. Just touching the brush into it, and then we're going to water it down significantly. This is going to be a very light wash. The reason I'm using a clear lid is because you want to be able to see through it. That's how light we want to go. Now I've got a picture of Pattinson up off screen here because I wanted to see his beard pattern. We're going to take this blue and just lightly start washing it on the face. You don't want any big deposits of it, so if you get a drop like that, you want to kind of smooth it out. And this has definitely like a gloss on it already, so it's not taking paint as easily as some things do. So it'll look like it wants to just keep moving around on there, and you just got to kind of keep messing with it. Maybe go back with a dry brush and sort of pat it on there. The reason we're using blue is because when dark facial hair is obscured by skin, like when we're seeing the follicles underneath the skin, it ends up being like diffused by it, and so it's not going to be straight black or gray, and that's something that a lot of people do wrong in my opinion, and it just makes it look too dark or like they've been sucking on a tailpipe or something. The blue gives it the right amount of subtlety, so you can see how that's starting to settle in there a little bit and change the color. You just want to keep doing that, and if you overdo it, you can dab it with your finger, and that kind of helps to spread it around a little bit. And you can see how it's taking to the texture of the skin a little bit and sort of creating like a stubble kind of look to it. Now you don't want a hard line, so the higher you get, the more watered down you want to go. So here I'm rinsing my brush, and now it's just a little bit wet with water, no paint, and I'm just kind of rubbing the line there to soften it. And don't be afraid to dab it, get a little paint on your finger, it's not a big deal. This is water soluble stuff. So you can see the difference on this side to this side, right? He's getting a little bit of that 5 o'clock shadow. So we're going to follow his beard pattern, let it get a little more dense in certain areas like the chin where he has like much more coverage. And so because we have a recess there, it wanted to pool. So I just take a dry brush and absorb what's there so that it's not too much, and we just keep going around. So, you know, this is definitely something that requires some patience. It takes a few passes a lot of times. So definitely practice if you have like a, you know, Marvel Legend or G.I. Joe head or something that you don't mind trying this on. Just get familiar with how this, you know, wet paint kind of spreads across plastic. Now, part of the reason we use blue is because we're going to go over it with some red. And when we do that, the red and the blue are going to kind of mix together and actually make it look a little bit darker. So we're going to do the same thing with the red as far as a wash consistency. As you can see, I mean, I'm barely getting any paint. And the red you want to be especially thin, like so thin that it's like almost barely there. We're going to go over everything, not just where the beard is. And again, you want it to be really thin and splotchy because the idea is blood passing through capillaries and whatnot underneath the skin. You want it to be very, very subtle, very, very thin. And this is not a special brush. This is a cheap one that came in like a craft store multi-pack. You don't need something expensive to do this. I mean, this brush sucks. Like it's like on his last legs. But for this kind of thing, it's all you need because you're just pushing some watered down paint around. Okay, next we're taking that flesh paint. Same kind of thing, just a little tiny dab, and we're really watering it down. And I'm actually going to pull a little bit of the red into it just to make it a little bit darker. Now that I've done that, I'm actually going to take a smaller detail brush. This is a size 5-0. And this is what I use for like little minor detail stuff like eyes. We're just gonna stain the whites of the eyes a bit with it. And to do that, because they're this like convex shape, we're just gonna let it pool at the bottoms. It'll pull to the sides a bit. See, that's too much there. So we're gonna dry the brush and soak some of it up. And what we're left with is an eye that has just a little bit more color to it. And so I'm gonna just kind of add and subtract as I see fit. I don't want it to be too bloodshot looking. So if there's too much, you just take a dry brush. It doesn't have water and paint on it, and it just soaks it right up. And this may take a couple of tries to get how I want it to look. This is very subtle, delicate work here. So if you don't feel like trying this part, I don't blame you. It's a little tougher. There, you see how it kind of pulls to the edges there? And then hopefully it stays in the corners where I want it. This is definitely a more advanced move. I mentioned I didn't want to do too much in that way. This is water soluble paint, so if you mess up, you just take a wet brush and like rub it off and it'll come off, and it shouldn't damage what's underneath. Okay, so this next bit is a little bit more advanced, but it's definitely much more optional. I mean, it's all optional, but you know what I'm saying? So I want to paint the lips a little darker. I've recently found a mixture of colors that I like. We're going to use that same flesh tone and same red, and we're going to add some of this raw sienna. Basically, I just take these, kind of mix them, you know, to the eye basically. Now looking at this, you might be like, dang, that looks kind of dark. But when you actually see it applied to the figure, it's going to change kind of the way it looks. We just want to do the lightest application here. And then what I like to do is take a little bit of water and thin it out. It's really hard to show this stuff on camera, so I'm doing my best. Hopefully you can see it. And then the upper lip is always going to be a little bit darker. So if you feel like you have the dexterity and the will, hit that upper lip with a little bit darker of a paint. The light comes from above generally, so it creates a shadow on the upper lip. All right, once I got the lips darker, I thought that the skin needed a little darkening as well. So what I've done is I've taken just a regular brown, same kind of paint, this burnt umber, and I'm doing that same kind of wash on the 5 o'clock shadow just to give it a little bit more dimension. And because I was looking at a picture of him again, and his beard is pretty brown, so I think that'll just help kind of sell the believability of the 5 o'clock shadow. And then another thing I like to do is take a little bit of that brown paint, again pretty thinned out, run a line of it across where the lips meet. Very subtle. It just adds a little bit more depth. And then Pattinson does have a little tiny mole right here, so I'm just going to take some of that same brown and just dab a little dot there. And then last step is we're going to do the gloss varnish. So this stuff, you don't have to do any augmenting to it. I just use the tiniest little bit. Take a really tiny brush, and we're just going to go over the mouth. And you don't want it to be too much. So if you get a little bit too much on there like I just did, clean the brush off, go back and reabsorb some of it. And then, I mean, just the tiniest amount that you can barely even see on the brush tip, and then hit those eyes with it. And you want to be careful not to get it outside the eye, because then it'll make the skin glossy too, and then it just looks wrong. And turn the head upside down if you need to get to the other side. It makes it easier. You have less in the way. These eyes were already pretty shiny, but adding that extra bit really just takes them to the next level. All right, so let's do a little comparison. All right, so here's the head we just painted on the left and one of the stock heads on the right. This stock head actually had more speckling to the paint job, so it is a little bit more lifelike than this one was. But I mean, you can see the difference. It just looks so much more real now. The main thing that does it, I think if you have to do one thing, adding the little bit of pink around the eyes really helps to sell it, because this looks so cartoony compared to it. So, and that's just the stock head sculpt right there. I mean, a little bit of time and paint can really get you a pretty cool result. Now, I do want to get out the Muff Toys head sculpt, because I have that too, and I want to show you the difference. On the right here, we've got the stock head. On the left is the Muff Toys head sculpt. It's sized for the McFarlane figure, but because McFarlane heads are so small, like it's actually pretty much the perfect size for the Mezco figure, I think. And then in the center, we have our custom Mezco one with just a little bit of paint added to it. And I honestly prefer the one in the middle. I think it's a more accurate sculpt. I think the Muff Toys one is incredible, but I think the Mezco one is just a better sculpt. So now, you know, your mileage may vary. You might think that the Muff one looks better. You might think this looks perfect. You know, it's all subjective. For me personally, I think the center one is the one to go with. So, okay, so I got the neck piece off, and this is a little bit tricky to do. Heated it up with a blow dryer. I pulled the cape over like this. This collar piece kind of gets in the way, but once I heated it up, It came loose pretty easily because it's just pegged in with this little peg right here into this little channel underneath. It's like that on both sides and then it connects in the front. By getting one off, I was able to just stick a tiny little like micro flathead screwdriver in here and pop the neck out. The challenge is raise this up by putting some kind of intermediary piece between this ball and this socket here. Okay, so trying to figure out the neck situation here, and I've tried a couple of things that didn't really work. So we're gonna go with the old standby hot glue. I use this all the time. Say I have a head like this that has just a wide opening with no neck connector in it. I fill it with hot glue, I stick it on the peg. Once it cools, you get a snug fit that is, you know, most of the time completely reversible. It really doesn't take much to get this thing to sit where it needs to. Like, this is it without popping it in, and that's where I want the height to be. Effectively, what I want the hot glue to do is to fill in this peg hole and seal around that one. What I'm going to do is put the glue on here pretty thick and then stick it on there. All right, it's always a little tricky to do it with hot glue because you don't want to get glue on stuff, and it's obviously, you know, it's hot. But the nice thing is it'll often retain mobility, so you can generally move it around, still retain articulation. So we're gonna let that cool for a bit. So the glue's cooled off now, and I'm gonna take the head off. As you can see, the neck stays on. I still have some articulation. You know, it couldn't go back in the first place because of this collar piece, but it can go forward, tilt still, and it stays on there. And something I forgot to mention, if you can see the glue under the neck, just take a little black acrylic paint, just paint that bad boy up, and now it'll be invisible under there. So, all right, so something else I want to fix here. My good buddy These Damn Toys on Instagram pointed out to me that the collar piece is like too slight, it's too short, which I find to be true. The collar is much more substantial, and he pointed out that Hot Toys messed that up too. And I've seen a lot of people getting like a third-party, you know, 3D print replacement piece and stuff. So what I decided to do was take the one from my McFarlane custom. Let me just try cutting this extra lip piece off and gluing it on to this. All right, checking in with some progress here. So I did end up cutting that lip piece off of the neck from the McFarlane one and gluing it on to this one, the existing one. I think it worked out perfectly. And then I painted the shoulder pads. So if you recall, they were the reverse of this. The gray parts were black and vice versa. Yeah, so last thing I think I want to do is to weather up his suit. There's almost like a greenish brown tint to the suit, and it's looking very cool here. This is like a cool gray. It's more on the blue spectrum. This stuff is flexible, like it's made to be on fabric that moves. Regular acrylic might get flaky. Probably not, but I don't want to risk it. I may mix in a little bit of green too, we'll see, but for now, we're gonna use this, and again, there'll be a link for this below. We're gonna water this down quite a bit. And actually, that's a little too baby turd, so we're gonna mix in happy little dap green. Go ahead, mix that in. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I wanna actually test this on the McFarlane one to see how it's gonna look. It's a little too yellowy green. I wanna get a little bit of black. Now, I know we've made this wet, but what we wanna do now is try to dry out the brush once we dab it on there. Now, I'm actually pretty happy with how the fabric itself looks. It's just these pads that I want to detail. I'm just going to kind of dab it on, tap it with our finger. We're going to hit the shoulder pads with it too. Because again, we don't want the suit to look too pristine. That was the issue with this. It looked brand new. Just make it look more lived in, more realistic. Like, you want it to look like he's been wearing this suit out night after night. Now, the next step is we want to do a little bit of dry brushing. Now, I've just mixed that little bit of black I just put down with some of the white that I had left over. So grab, you know, a figure or something plastic and just kind of lightly scrape it. See how it picks up on the raised edges, and you can kind of dull it with your finger a bit. Just ever so lightly. You don't want it to be too bright, so definitely wipe some off if you've got more than you want. And a straight brush like this is usually a little bit easier to do this with because it's pretty consistent across the whole edge of it. And hopefully you can hear that little ch-ch-ch. That's kind of the sound you want because that lets you know you're just grazing it. I also want to do a little bit on the cowl, bring out some of these ridge details. So it's very subtle, but you'll notice if you compare these two, I mean, it might not even be picking up well on camera, but there is a difference there. I'm starting to notice that the legs could be longer, I think.
The legs could be longer, I think. Legs could be longer.
I don't think I want to mess with lengthening the legs, but I was lying to myself. This guy's so stumpy. His legs are way too short, and I couldn't live with it on the shelf like this. We're going to lengthen the legs. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this unless you have experience doing this kind of stuff. You know, try it at your own risk. This is an expensive figure, and we're going to have to chop him up. I used a blow dryer, the foot off. Mezco doesn't do a lot of these high ankle boots like this, so there's not really like a lot you could do to use an alternative leg piece, I don't think. And this suit is so intricate, I didn't want to cut it up. That's a whole thing. I don't want, you know, you got to like go through the seam on the back here. I don't want to do all that. So the easiest way is going to be to lengthen his lower legs a little bit. This is very snugly fit over this lower part of the leg, because as I was trying to wrench it off, you know, carefully, but I was putting a lot of stress on this part. I don't know if you can see, it's getting kind of white at that line right above my nail there. But that's okay, because that's where I'm going to cut it anyway. And insert a plastic rod in between the two. Drill a hole in the top part, hole in this piece, insert a plastic rod, super glue it in place. And then when I slide this back over it, you know, the pants will help cover it up. Okay, a little snag in the plan I didn't account for. I think that as I'm drilling into the lower leg, it's hitting the peg that goes from the knee into the calf. So I'm gonna have to be pretty delicate about this. I think it'll still work, but I just gotta move carefully. Hopefully this works. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so that's exactly what happened. I was almost home free. I pushed it too far and I ruined the joint here. There's supposed to be a peg that comes off of there. Luckily, I've got more of these, but it's a much more involved thing to fix this. So I gotta figure it out. I mean, I'll get it done. I always do, but yeah, this sucks. All right, you can see what a mess this has turned into. I cut myself. I haven't had a custom go awry like this in quite some time. I got this leg fixed. I was able to pretty much repair it as it was. Thankfully, it retains the knee bend. I probably do have to be a little careful with it, but realistically, I'm not going to be posing this a lot anyway. It's going to go in my display. But that still left me with this leg I had to figure out. So rather than try to drill, I used my Dremel and I hollowed out around the peg. And the idea now is to use one of these rods, drill into this so that it fits onto the exposed peg here, and then I glue that in place. I feel like I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted a figure of this version of Batman that looked accurate, and I thought I could do a couple little things to make it look accurate pretty easily. Turns out Mezco is so bad at this sometimes that it really turned into like a major ordeal and a headache for me. So I definitely don't recommend messing with the height. You know, I'm very experienced in this, and this was enough to make me want to just throw this figure in the trash. So, and I don't usually get like that. All right, so I got the legs done and everything's holding well. You know, once I knew what issue I had created with that one, this one went much more smoothly. And then these are pretty much set up to just kind of like slide right on and off. I'm gonna use some hot glue just to secure them. All right, so here we are with the figure all done in the display, and I'm sure a lot of people skip ahead to this part. I don't blame you. I wish I could have done that myself. But yeah, I got it done, and you know, I'm happy with the end result. It was quite a journey to get here. I haven't been this frustrated with a figure in a long time. It really changed my feelings on this release in general. I stand by what I said earlier. I think that the soft goods are really nice. Like I think the way they did the suit was smart, but the body was garbage. Like it was squat. He had no neck. The proportions are absolutely incorrect. For me and my standard of collecting, it necessitated fixing it in this way. I'm really frustrated with Mezco for this one. I was talking about this on Instagram earlier today and my frustration. Like I've been saying for a while, you know, I have a few more things on pre-order. This was one of them. And once those come out, like I think I'm just kind of done with them. Unless there's like one thing that I'm like, I couldn't make that, and I might pull the trigger on it. But yeah, I mean, third-party stuff's getting so good. 3D printing options are so available. Soft goods online. Like, I'll probably still buy them to part out and stuff, but I don't think I'm really going to be supporting them as regularly as I do. And I don't buy everything they put out, but this is another John Wick, a figure that should have been a pretty easy slam dunk, and they screwed up like some of the easiest parts of it. The hard part to get right was the detailing, the suit, the head sculpt. They nailed all that stuff. Like that, those aspects of this figure are so good. What they messed up on were the most basic fundamentals of the human body, which is like, how do you do that when your whole business is making tiny human people? So that's where I'm at on that. But anyway, it was worth it in the end, you know, to have a soft goods version of this on my shelf. I don't like to complain about this kind of stuff because it's a choice to get involved in these things, and you know, people are struggling all over the world. You know, they're absolutely wiping out Palestinians right now. What am I going to complain about a toy for? Like, that's silly. That's my rant on that. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you learned some stuff that you could either apply to this figure or some others. So just to look at it again in some better lighting, got the weathering done and the kind of changing the color of the suit to have that little more of a green, brown, dirty look to it. I think that really helps with the accuracy. Head repaint, touch up, really just brings out the life of this head sculpt. Repainted the shoulder pads to be the correct colors. I took some double-sided tape and put it under the cape here so that this sits flush with that collar. Otherwise there's a gap there that looks weird. I also took some double-sided tape and put it in these folds here because I want to hold this in place. I also use my magnet trick. If you follow my channel, you know I do this a lot. I'll take some little tiny neodymium magnets and sort of place them inside the folds of the cape. So I'm happy to have it. I'm happy that it looks like this now. I think it really looks like a small hot toy or like the in-art figure now, you know, as much as something in this scale can. So I'm really proud of it. I'm just really resentful of the amount of work that was required to get it to look like this, and the cut on my finger. So now I've been meaning to mention what this backdrop is because I know I'm going to be getting some questions about it. So this is a piece of black poster board, foam board, that I spray painted with a granite finish spray paint. I don't remember the name of it, but you can find it at Home Depot, Lowe's, Bunnings Warehouse, Down Under, probably any craft store. And then the backdrop is an image of the bat cave that I found online that I took to FedEx office. And I just had it blown up onto a piece of foam board. He's in the display now with my custom semi-realistic Batman Animated Series figure. We've got my custom Adam West, but like kind of more hardcore looking style figure with his Batmobile and little Batcave. And then of course we have the 89 Batcave Dyro that I made on the channel. There's the Batmobile that I customized. We've got my Batfleck and those Ninja Turtles. Oh, and then custom tumbler. That's not the McFarlane one, that's one that I built. And then a NECA Batman Begins figure. But yeah, so, you know, another shelf in my Batcave is finally complete. And he looks awesome next to this car. I mean, like, that's what I wanted right there. So that's going to wrap up this one. If you all would be so kind as to stay tuned, I have a trailer at the end of this for my brand new graphic novel called CYN. It's kind of a sci-fi western. It's sort of like Unforgiven meets Terminator 2. It's a really cool trailer, I think. I'm really proud of it. And the book is actually a sequel to my 2021 sci-fi reimagining of The Count of Monte Cristo called Count. And the cool thing about this is, like, you can read it in any order or, you know, by themselves. That's available now. I will have an Amazon affiliate link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, you know, all that good YouTube stuff. And let me know, did you get this figure? Are you gonna try messing with it? I'm curious because I wasn't happy with it as it was, but I know a lot of people are, and I'd like to know, like, if you were happy with it, let me know. Genuinely, this isn't like a, oh, help comment for engagement. Like, I wanna know if you like this figure. So yeah, anyway, that's gonna do it. Please share this with a friend if you think they'd enjoy it, and check out the other stuff on my channel, and I invite you to subscribe. Thank you all, and until next time, keep your head on swivel.